All right, let's move on to running back and dive into this position. That's a good little segue there as we have Ezekiel Elliott priced as the highest running back here on DraftKings at 9,200. And then the second highest price, $200 less, Saquon Barkley in that same game, 9,000. Got Christian McCaffrey coming in at 8,800, Todd Gurley at 7,900, David Johnson. Melvin Gordon won't be playing. So we got Le'Veon Bell. That rounds out your high-priced guys. And then the likes of Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, Damian Williams, Leonard Fournette, Dalvin Cook, in that mid-range there that people are talking about. And you got Kerryon Johnson, Carson, Eckler, Devontae Freeman, Ingram in this, kind of cheap range. And honestly, like where most of the chalk is coming from is kind of that low mid-range to basically $5,000 to $7,000. I mean, Chris Carson, we've talked about it already. He's getting hype. I mean, and it's a good matchup for him against Cincinnati. So at 5,700, I don't blame people for doing that. Dalvin Cook, he was one of the first people I saw people talking about, as Kevin alluded to, people wanting to play Kyler Murray. Like Dalvin Cook came in at 6,000, and that was right after he had a preseason breakout for that 85-yard play or whatever it was. And they're talking about using him more in the passing game. We know Atlanta defense likes to give up a lot of pass catching plays to the running backs there. So that's interesting. Leonard Fournette at 6,100, if he's going to be a bell cow back and this KC matchup stays close as Vegas is projecting it to, you got a lot of interesting plays and ways to go here. But plus you got a guy like, Austin Eckler comes in at what? He's here at 5,500. And then Justin Jackson, you got to go all the way down. He's $4,000, and he's the inside the tackles running back that they're going to be using. And at $4K against an Indy team, if the Chargers are up, like I could see people using Justin Jackson as a pivot there in tournaments when you can get him, because we've seen it happen before. Like that Pittsburgh game I alluded to, Justin Jackson ended up being the play. It wasn't Austin Eckler. So that's good. Let's talk about the running back position. I want to hear where you guys are at. Maddie, get into your guys and who you're looking at from the running back position to start us off.
Yeah, so you mentioned that 5,500 to 6K range, and I think that's going to be where I end up on my running back position, especially since I'm going to be playing Mahomes and company, and those guys are not cheap. So I think that my three running backs, I'll end up with a running back in the flex just because of running backs a little easier to predict, and there are so many good spots this week for running backs. But, I mean, you talked about Carson being in just a great matchup. I mean, biggest favorite of the week is the Seahawks. They're -10 at home against Cincinnati. Cincinnati was 30th in adjusted line yards, 29th in power rank, 30th in stuffed rank, 28th in second level yards, and 21st in open field yards last year. So you're looking at just a dream matchup for a guy who's playing on the run heaviest team in the NFL at home in a 10-point biggest favorite of the week. It's just, I know he doesn't have pass catching upside really. But in this matchup, the only thing that can burn me here is if the Bengals come out and put up points early on Seattle, and they just have to abandon the run. But even then, I don't think that happens because they don't really have the wide receiver personnel right now to just throw the ball around the yard. They're going to have to run the ball, and I'm trusting that they're going to do that here. So Carson makes a ton of sense at his price tag and based on the matchup and everything. Outside of him, you're looking at Fournette is a awesome run back in that KC Jacksonville game, because they've said that they want to involve him more on third downs and in the pass game and all that. So he's going to be an every down back, and it's never a question of is Fournette good enough. It's a question of how healthy is Fournette all the time. And in week one, when he's got no injuries and he's fresh, that's the time you want to jump on him and take advantage of this cheap price tag, because he does have the ceiling. And as soon as they get inside the 5-yard line, you know where the ball's going. It's going to Leonard Fournette, and he's going to pound it right into the end zone. Especially the Chiefs are a defense that you can run the ball on too. So you're looking at both pass game involvement and a good rushing matchup here. And what I project is one of the highest scoring games of the week, and Vegas has it that way as well. And then outside of that, you mentioned Dalvin Cook. He's the third main guy that I'm looking at in this range. And we target Atlanta with pass catching running backs. And Atlanta was actually bad in the advanced line metrics. When I was looking at that earlier this week, where's Dalvin Cook here? So Atlanta was 31st in the adjusted line yards, 27th in power rank, 32nd in stuffed rank. But they actually they were middle of the pack in the second level in open field yards. So that tells me that Atlanta's defensive line was horrible last year, and that they were relying on their linebackers and safeties to come up and make tackles in space to limit the big yardage gains. And I think the guy like Dalvin Cook, a team that has now changed offensive direction and is going to want to run the ball more. I just think that this is just a no-brainer play to just play Dalvin Cook here at this price tag. And then other than him, you mentioned Eckler. I love the spot for Eckler. The Indy plays massive zone. Like they run zone an insane amount of time. So you're looking at running backs and tight ends who can catch the ball against zone defenses. And that's where Indy gave up all their production last year, was to the pass catching running backs and tight ends. So Eckler makes a ton of sense in a PPR format, and we've seen him steal goal line carries away from Melvin Gordon at times. So I anticipate him being involved at the goal line as well. So those are the four guys that I'm looking at in that range. And based on my roster construction, I'm going to end up probably with three of them. But you obviously can play. I'm not going to talk you off McCaffrey and Barkley at the top. Those would be the two guys that I paid up for if I was paying up. But I just based on my roster construction, I don't know that I'm going to get there this week.
That's fair. That's fair. The Justin Jackson timeshare, Anthony Lynn came out, talked about that. That doesn't worry you at all. Are you kind of projecting him? We just saw Thursday game, Bears, Packers, Tariq Cohen was lined up in the slot pretty much everywhere as a Swiss Army knife and got 10 targets, converted those for 8 catches, 60 yards or something like that, I think. Is that what you're projecting Eckler for?
I don't think so. Cohen was utilized more in the slot role and all that. I think you're going to see more of a traditional split here than what the Bears did. But I think the split is going to wait on the side of Eckler. Like if you look at Jackson's attempts last year, like Melvin Gordon missed their Week 7 game in London against Tennessee, and Jackson only had 2 attempts there, and he eclipsed 8 attempts only once after that. And Melvin Gordon was playing banged up the rest of the year, and I think he missed 3 games outside of that. You're looking at Eckler, who's probably, my guess, if I had to guess a split, I'd say it's probably 65-35 in favor of Eckler.
Okay. I like it. Kev, talk to me. What we doing? You can't leave this conversation or end this conversation without talking about Damian Williams and what the Chiefs are doing there at running back. Talk to the people.
Well, again, I think, this might be the deepest position there is out there in terms of just running backs and just overall fantastic spots. As you mentioned, Dalvin Cook, I think, is probably going to be the highest owned running back on the slate. The matchups there, everything's there. We know the Falcons are still terrible at allowing receptions to running backs. I think over the last 3 years they've given up the most receptions to running backs over the last 3 years. So he's a smash play, right? But I just think if you look at that range right there's so many running backs going in that range that I feel like that there's some solid leverage plays off of him. As you mentioned, Chris Carson, for sure, definitely. If you go back and look at last year, the Bengals gave up the second most DK points to the position last year. They didn't really do a whole lot to really make any upgrades to that side of the football. So that's not something that really worries me all that much. So I definitely think Chris Carson is 100% in play. Then you also have the narrative Pete Carroll saying that they want to get him even more involved in the passing game. So I definitely think you can go there. You already mentioned Austin Eckler. I think looking at some play, like Nick Chubb, I think everybody's going to want to play Nick Chubb. as well, going up against the Titans at home right now. I mean, he's literally the only guy there. I mean, unless you think Hilliard is going to how much run he could get. It seems like that they want to even use Chubb on third down. If they do that, I mean, Chubb is really hard to get away from at 6,400. As far as Damian Williams goes, he's right there too at 6,300. I still think Damian Williams is going to get touched. I still think he's the lead back in this offense. I think that he gets. I don't think he's ever going to be somebody that gets like 20, 25 touches a game. That's just not in the realm. I just don't think they need to do that with him. And I think some of these other guys are going to get some run, but I do think that you can expect probably 15 to 18 touches for Damian Williams. We know he's going to be heavily utilized as a pass catcher as well. And to neutralize this Jacksonville defense a little bit, I do think that with their terrific corners they have in Jalen Ramsey and Bouye, that they are going to, the teams they try to, basically funnel everything into the middle of the field. And so I think that does a lot of good things for Damian Williams as a pass catcher. Also Travis Kelce. But I think Damian Williams, I think you can probably lock him in for 12 to 13 touches or 12 to 13 carries. And I think he gets anywhere from probably at least 5 targets in this game, if not a little bit more. And so I do like Damian Williams. I'm not really that worried about him going up against Jacksonville. I think they will utilize Damian Williams as a pass catcher, and I think you can bank on that. He'll have some opportunities in the end zone, and he's somebody with all the players that are going around him, like Chubb and Fournette and Cook and so like Chris Carson, all these guys are all going around him. No one's going to play Damian Williams, and I think that's a mistake in this matchup. I think this game has potential to be one of the highest scoring games on the slate, or the highest scoring game on the slate. So I want as much action as I can with this. So I really do like Damian Williams. I don't think there's really anything to be afraid of, and I think even more so with everything that's happened with him on this offseason, like he's been like the most highly like debated player I think on fantasy Twitter that I've ever seen. Like it seems like every week there's some new debate going on or surrounded around Damian Williams. So I don't think there's really anything to be worried about. I think his role is pretty secure in this offense. So I do like Damian Williams. Past that, if you want to go down a little bit further, there's just so much value here. Mark Ingram going against the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins are absolute horrific. They gave up the most DK points last year to the position. There is the threat of Lamar Jackson stealing, goal line work or stealing a touchdown or, something like that. But I don't think in this matchup, in this game, I think you could see Mark Ingram get quite a few touches here. So, playing him, I don't think anybody's going to be on that at 5,100. I think one interesting play is Dion Lewis at 4,700. I think for Tennessee and if, with their backfield, whether it's Derrick Henry or Dion Lewis, I think this is going to be something similar to what you saw sort of like a New England situation. Is this a Derrick Henry week or is this a Dion Lewis week? And this feels like a Dion Lewis week to me because I don't think they're going to use Derrick Henry heavily as a pass catcher. And if Cleveland gets ahead in this game early at home, which is very much in the range of possibilities, I think Dion Lewis could be used heavily as a pass catcher. You look at him last year, I mean, he had like 4 or 5 weeks with I think at least 15 to 20 DK points, and at 4,700, that's a pretty solid place to go. If you're looking for some value here, and so for me, like I think he's definitely in play in a matchup where it figures that they're going to be trailing here. We know, Mariota's not a guy who likes to really push the ball down the field a whole lot, so I think you really could see some dump offs to him. So I do like Dion Lewis. I think as a kind of a contrarian play off of some of these other guys that are in this range. I wanted to play, you have the Kenyon Drake and Kalen Ballage situation. Like, I want to wait and see how that thing kind of plays out. Both of them are super cheap at 4,700 and 4,500, but I don't think I can go there yet. And then I think there's the Miles Sanders situation here, going in against Washington, 3,900, and then you have Jordan Howard at 4,200. But right now, like, I feel like that's a situation. Like, I don't know if it's PTSD from what just happened on Thursday night with, David Montgomery, but like I feel like Miles Sanders is in a terrific spot here at 3,900. They're I think they're like 10-point favorites in this game. They're home. Yeah. I mean, isn't that kind of everything we look for in a running back? Is as a guy at home favored. Could be heavy favorites where they're running the ball a lot. Giving Miles Sanders opportunities to get carries in a game where maybe it gets a little bit away from them to give him some more playing time. So, I mean, it's hard to really get away from Miles Sanders. What are you guys doing with Miles Sanders this week? Is he somebody that's on your guys' radar?
Well, for me, I think it just goes back to these other guys that we mentioned that are kind of in the similar price range. Like, I know Chris Carson's going to get 20 to 25 carries. I know Dalvin Cook is going to touch the ball 20 times. I know Leonard Fournette, as long as the game stays relatively close, which I think it will, that Fournette's going to get 20 to 25 touches. So I don't think that you really need to go to Sanders, but I do think that it is one of the best spots on the board in terms of matchup and home favorite and all that. And Sanders is a talented running back, but they did trade for Jordan Howard. Howard likely is probably going to vulture some touchdowns, especially at the goal line. I just, if I was going to play one of the two Eagles, it would be Sanders. I just, with the other guys in this price range, I think that there's safer guys with higher ceilings. My question for you guys is, what are you guys doing with Breida and Coleman? Because those two guys feel like it's a good spot to get exposure to the San Francisco offense, and not having to go through the air for it.
I think it's a tough situation right now because I feel like that I don't know what to like. I don't think you can. I don't know if you really know what to expect here, right? From this, because I think it could easily be a split backfield, but I feel like that there's opportunity there for both. I do feel like that Tevin Coleman is going to be more of the pass catcher, and if this game is high scoring,
I think that's how I lean.
And so I feel like Tevin Coleman is probably the way to go, but I feel like that there's probably going to be more ownership on Breida. He's carried a lot of offseason hype, especially through draft season and everything else. And anybody who plays redraft or is even remotely on Twitter has seen that it's been Matt Breida hype over the last couple of weeks. And I think Tevin Coleman is kind of the forgotten man, even though he's still listed as the number one running back on the depth chart. So this just feels like a game where I feel like it's more of a Tevin Coleman game than it would be a Matt Breida. And so if I was going to have to take a stance on one of them, I definitely think it's Matt Breida would be the play, or excuse me, Tevin Coleman would be the play, just because I feel like I said, I think he's more of the pass catcher here, somebody who profiles better there. And that if this game does get to be as high scoring as a lot of people think that it's going to be, I just can't see how Tevin Coleman doesn't lead this team in receptions, and that's kind of what we're looking for, especially on DK with it being a full PPR.
Yeah, I just wonder because obviously Shanahan he's supported two running backs before in Atlanta, and we see New England's system all the time. Both Michelle and White, even in the same game, can go off. So yeah, I was just curious how you guys were kind of treating that San Francisco situation, because those guys aren't that expensive either. And you can run the ball in Tampa Bay pretty easily. So it just feels like everybody that's going to get exposure to that game is going to go Garoppolo, Marquise Goodwin, Dante Pettis, Winston, Evans, Godwin, Kittle, and Howard, and nobody's going to play the two running backs from San Francisco. So if you're game stacking in another game, I felt like getting exposure to one of those guys would be a good way to get exposure to that game. I just didn't know how you guys were approaching that situation.
Speaking of that situation, though, there is one other in that same game. I don't want to play any Peyton Barber or Ronald Jones. Those guys.
You're going to play Dare.
That's what I was about to ask. I was like, what about Dare? Right? He's supposed to. He's projected to be the pass catching back in that offense. They've said he's supposed to be the third down back, right? And if this is a game that we think that they're going to have to throw the ball a lot, I don't know. Nobody's really talking about him as a play. And I just think I'm almost positive. I have to go back. I'm going to look real quick, but I'm almost positive he's 3K, he's bare minimum. Yeah, he's 3K. Yeah, he's flat mid at $3,000, and a game that we're all expecting to be one of the highest scoring on the slate. He's going to be the third down back. He looked very explosive in the preseason. I don't know. I feel like this is a spot to kind of get a little contrarian and, to get a little bit different and still get exposure to this game. Maybe it's a little crazy, but at 3K, I'm not saying go out and, and jam him in, 40 or 50% of your lineups, but I think he's somebody that I would definitely just want to sprinkle in who, would it be crazy to say if the guy goes out and gets 5 catches for 60 yards or something like that? Or I don't think that's all that crazy to say for something like that. And at $3,000, what he allows you to get the rest of your lineup, I think there's some merit there to what he can do. And he's a bigger back. It's not like he's just a satellite back. He's somebody that could definitely, find his way into the end zone as well. I've said all offseason, I feel like he's actually going to be the lead back by the end of the year if they don't go out and trade for like a Melvin Gordon or something like that doesn't happen. Like, I think he's the lead back. I think he's the most talented running back in this backfield. And I think at the very least to start the season, he is going to, at the very least, get pass catching work. And if you look at it, like Bruce Arians knows how to utilize pass catching backs like we did with David Johnson. I'm not necessarily saying he's David Johnson, not at all, but I know that he knows how to do that. He knows how to get his players in space and get them in plus matchups. And I feel like that for him, I feel like this is a spot that I don't know if you'll get him this cheap the rest of the year. And so at $3K and one of the best games on the slate, I don't know how you couldn't at least have a little bit of interest in him, especially when we know he's going to be the third down back in this offense.
We know that for sure.
That's what they said, because they released Andre Ellington, so it makes him the third back. And I think they signed TJ Logan, but I mean, who the fuck is that? And and Peyton Barber and Ronald Jones are not pass catchers. That is not their strengths whatsoever. Like, neither one of them are any good at doing that. Ronald Jones was never good at that in college. He comes here, and all preseason, all the beat reporters have said how much he has struggled with even trying to be a pass catcher. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I really honestly feel like this is where we're heading with this. And at the very least, he carves out the role as the pass catching back, which is what I would want in that offense. And I think the ceiling here is that he takes over the offense.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a better play than Jacoby Brissett in GPPs. I'll say that much. But I got to take it as a wait and see approach. I mean, especially with what we just saw with David Montgomery with these rookies. I know I was cut out when you guys were talking Miles Sanders, and that was kind of my same feeling with that too. Is like, I don't know if I need to go there just yet. And even so, like Kev, I don't. I mean, maybe he goes out and balls out and puts up, 5 catches, 60 yards, a touchdown, runs on the ground for, let's just say 50 and a touchdown. So Draftkings will probably increase his price from the flat 3K to 4,500, 5,000. And that's still like pretty viable for matchups going forward. I just don't know this week if I can get there enough with the way that the pricing is on DraftKings for all of these other guys in a situation we just haven't seen play out quite yet. But for GPPs though, like I said, I think it is approachable from a 20 max standpoint from large field GPPs to get a 3K player in there that is, or at least that we assume is the pass catcher from what they've told us, will be out there on third downs, and on a site like DraftKings where you're getting 1 point for reception, that has some merit to it, and you can play them in the flex and still load up on viable running backs that you think are going to get you 25 to 30 at that position. So I do like it from that standpoint. I know you guys were talking about Tevin Coleman as well too. I like Tevin Coleman. You're talking about a guy, I don't know if this was said, but has played in that division against Tampa Bay multiple times when he was at Atlanta. So he's familiar with seeing this team. He actually has had some pretty decent games against this Tampa Bay team as well. And so I think that has a little bit of merit to it, especially when the surroundings are familiar for a guy like that. So I like him in that matchup a lot. I wanted to kind of talk about real quickly before we move on. Another guy that I'm liking is Joe Mixon in this matchup. It's just the offense is really banged up from Cincinnati, but the ball has to go somewhere. And I really don't know how I feel about Tyler Boyd, but Joe Mixon is a Swiss Army knife. I feel like at the position, he, catches passes, lines up in the slot as well. Big time rusher there, huge playmaking ability. And he saw the fourth most percentage of red zone rush attempts last year in 2018. So if they, somehow end up getting down there and he gets a score, we've seen this guy pay off dividends where, he's getting 100 yards on on the ground and getting a score. Maybe he gets two. There's just so many limited options, especially with Auden Tate now on the injury report for Cincinnati, that I'm liking Joe Mixon a little bit in GPPs in this game. And like Maddie said, I'm not here to say it's for sure going to be Seattle and there's no way that Cincinnati can stay in this. If Cincinnati ends up putting up points, like where are those points coming from? I'm going to pick Mixon for that. So I do like him, but I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on Todd Gurley. Jesus, Kev. Todd Gurley and Le'Veon Bell. These are veteran guys. Todd Gurley, obviously same situation, but he, we know what he can do when given a bell cow role. And we kind of saw that teeter off in the playoffs and postseason, but now he's back. And it seems like they're going to give him that role again. Going against Carolina, this is a game that has a pretty high over-under, so points are expected to be scored. He should be there on the goal line. No C.J. Anderson there to vouch touches from him. Is he viable? And then Le'Veon Bell there at 7,100 going against Buffalo. I don't see a lot of people talking about him as well yet. So you got two veteran guys here that are low price for what we know their production can be. Is there any merit to targeting these guys at all this week?
These are two guys that I've faded the entire offseason in terms of leading up to like best balls and season long drafts and all that. It's just two guys that I don't like their situations that they're in this year for different reasons. So you have Le'Veon Bell, who was obviously in the Steelers system, which is probably the most running back friendly system there is in terms of fantasy points. And now he not only goes to the Jets, but he goes to Adam Gase led Jets. And we saw Adam Gase single-handedly not be able to use Kenyon Drake properly, and insisted on giving Frank Gore carries instead. And Bell's had a whole year off. We don't know what kind of shape he's in. Of course, the reports are going to say, "Oh, he's in the best shape of his life." But I mean, what kind of we're not going to get the 32 touch Le'Veon Bell that we had in Pittsburgh in that scheme-friendly offense. We're going to get probably, my guess is, in the 17, 18 touch range for Bell here. And I mean, is that enough for him to get to his ceiling on this offense? And I just don't think it is, both this week and over the course of the whole season. And then the Todd Gurley deal, it would be one thing if he was dealing with a muscle injury back at the end of last season, and then he's had the entire offseason to recover and all that. But when you're dealing with arthritis, that doesn't go away. That's like with you for the rest of your life, and it can flare up at any time. And it's just, you're not going to be able to know, oh, is this a good Todd Gurley knee day or is it a bad Todd Gurley knee day? And the thing that kind of told me that, hey, this is a little more serious than what the Rams are leading on for us to believe is the fact that he only had 12 opportunities in the Super Bowl of all games. Like, that's the one game of the year where even if you're playing a little hurt, you're going to be on the field getting as many touches as you possibly can, especially when you're the franchise guy who they made the highest paid player at the position. So I'm not buying the Todd Gurley's good. Yeah, he probably gets 15 to 17 touches here, but is that enough, and how healthy is he? I'm not going to play that game. It's a good matchup. And if you want to play him on 5 or 10% on your 20 max, by all means do that. But if you're 1 to 3 lineups like me, I'm just going to go with, if I'm paying up, CMC or Barkley, or stick to that 6K range this week. And it's you're playing with fire there. It's just a lot of uncertainty when it's already hard enough to predict guys that are, when they're healthy, how they're going to do. So trying to predict a guy when he's not really full health makes it even tougher. So he's a stay away from me until I can see that he can handle his 24 carry workload,
No, I hear you. Kev, real quick, same type of thoughts for you on those two guys?
Who are the two guys?
Not Dare and not Jacoby Brissett.
Todd Gurley.
Yeah, not that one. Gurley and Bell.
It's dangerous to give me full control over what I can put up on the screen, what I can't.
It really is. It really is.
I can pretty much say whatever it is I want.
Yeah, it's not good.
I need to put in my bio, I am not responsible for what Kevin types.
So, Yeah, I mean, I don't think, at least on this week, I don't think you need to play either one of them. I mean, I think Todd Gurley at 7,900 is somewhat interesting. It's considering last year, I mean, you pretty much never got him below, 9K. So at 7,900 against Carolina, I mean, it's not a terrible spot. And I mean, I don't know what to believe anymore. It was kind of quiet all on the Western Front, if you will, for most of the offseason. And then all of a sudden, these last couple of weeks, we've really heard a lot of hype around Todd Gurley saying that, and even this week saying that there's going to be no limitations. He's going to be able to get a full workload. So I don't know. Maybe this is a buying window for him where, he's not going to carry the ownership because so many people are afraid of, what his situation is going to be, which is why we saw like in draft season, why we saw like it was Henderson hype season. And I just think that I think we're underestimating a little bit on Todd Gurley, especially early in the season. I think he's going to be fine. And I think he's somebody, would anybody surprised if he went out and had 100 yards, 50 yards receiving, and 2 touchdowns? Like not at all. Like it's certainly in the range of his possibilities. So I think that he is at least viable. If you wanted to play him to get off some of that, the higher priced, Christian McCaffrey or Saquon or Ezekiel Elliott, because he's certainly in those guys' and he can do the same stuff that all of them can do. Like he has that same ceiling as all of them. So like, I do think there's some merit to playing him there. Some of the other high priced guys, Le'Veon Bell, I really don't want to have any interest, especially going against Buffalo. I think they're a top 3 defense this year. I just don't like that matchup. And, after that, I think the other one would be David Johnson. And this is tough, right? Because once they acquired Snacks Harrison, their run defense became one of the best in the league, once they acquired him. So, they're going to have him there, which to deal with. So the positive for David Johnson, though, is I think he's going to be much more utilized as a pass catcher, back to, what he should be doing. We've talked about lining him up in the slot and things like that. So again, if this is one of those sneaky shootout games that not as many people are on, I think David Johnson at 7,700, if you wanted to go there, I could understand it. I won't have a lot of exposure there. But I do think Todd Gurley, though, is intriguing.
Something that would make me more interested in Gurley is if the Rams came out with one of their 3 running backs inactive. That would give me a little vote of confidence that, okay, maybe Gurley's going to see a full workload here and one of the other running backs is not active, so they're not worried about his knee. That's probably the one thing that I would keep an eye on. But if both Malcolm Brown and Henderson are both active, just stay away.
The one last thing, I guess, about the running back position, do you guys think, I think that even when we talk about like a Dalvin Cook, for example, who I think a lot of people think is going to be really chalky, do we think that ownership, like that any running back is really going to be all that heavily owned because of just how many running backs are in terrific spots this week, that it's going to kind of suppress their ownership? Versus, in some weeks where you might see a player who's like 40 or 50% owned in some spots, or maybe we don't see that. Maybe everybody kind of hovers around 20, just because of the suppressed ownership, because there's so many good plays there's so many players that are in such good spots that we sort of overthink it instead of, or you might say, well, I'm going to fade Dalvin Cook a little bit because of, how heavy his ownership is in tournaments, but where it could end up being a mistake and you get in and everything locks and you're like, holy shit, Dalvin Cook's only like 25% owned, which is, much less than what you thought he was going to be.
Yeah, I think it's going to be spread out myself. I think the one guy that would be the heavy one is probably Dalvin Cook. The way I've been approaching it is thinking the running back position to me is the most predictable and least variance. You know the guys that are going to get the volume and the snaps and the work, whereas the wide receiver position, you're relying on targets that are a little uncertain. You're relying on getting deep targets and red zone targets, and those aren't as easy to predict. So even when running backs are a little more popular, I tend to not worry too much about running back ownership, just because that is a less variance position. But I do think, Kev, that's a great point. I do think the running back position is a little bit spread out this week in terms of ownership.
Yeah, I think it will do with a lot of what contest you're looking at as well too. I mean, the more people that are in it, ironically, I feel like the more that the ownership's kind of spread out a little bit more. Whereas you're in the single entries in those GPP tournaments, with maybe 5,000 people. Like, I think it's fair enough to say that I would imagine Dalvin would be like 37% owned, like in a $50 single entry, a $12 single entry like that. Like you start to see more players be high owned in those single entries because that's where the experience is going or tends to go as far as DFS players go. And people aren't just trying to get bullets in there to just get bullets in there. You're not getting casual players who, you know, I want to play my favorite players on my team that I root for and things of that nature, which kind of spreads it out, especially in week one. Like week one is where people, you know, I need to get exposure to this guy. I want to play this guy because of this or that. And we don't really know kind of where the funnel's going or who the plays end up being or who's going to be the lead at that, you know, at that point in time until we see what the coaches are doing. Coming from a Bears fan, that's just what happened on Thursday. So that's kind of where my head's at right now. But I do think in single entries, especially for playing them, like I know that the guys who are usually predicted to be chalk are even that much more chalkier in those tournaments. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Dalvin at close to 40 unless something else, some other news breaks at this point.